Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here. It's great to have all of you here. I'm very excited to be here in Bangalore. When I heard this was happening and Mr. Nilekani was here and Rajiv and Nitin, great to speak with you guys as well. I mean, great presentation and the enthusiasm is absolutely palpable. Mr. Nilekani, just to jump right into it, you said we've seen this movie before with Aadhaar. I mean, from the time that it started to the time that it was finally adopted in 2016 when a mobile network really launched and they used that to build out their network and get customers. Where are we in the ONDC journey in that life cycle from the time that we've started to, I mean, really sort of that 2016 moment?
I think with the early pieces of the digital public infrastructure, I think it took more time to get the market momentum because people were, of course, wondering what it was and skeptical about it and so on. So I think, Aadhaar was launched in 2009 and it's only, the eKYC really took off only in 2016. UPI was launched in 2016 but took off maybe 2-3 years later and so on. So it takes time between launching something and making it scale up. But I think that time is now getting compressed because I think people are far more aware of the power and potential of such an approach. And now we have folks like Antler who I think are really taking the lead in creating an ecosystem. They talked about capital, community, content. I think it's a brilliant way of doing it. So the fact that they're going to be systematically creating a set of cohorts who will work on this, I think this time around it will happen much faster. So I think I'm very, very optimistic that in the next couple of years you'll see a lot of really great companies coming out of this.
Mr. Nilekani, do you think we need a big sort of marketing push? Antler is, of course, a great initiative in terms of what they're doing. And I mean, for this to work, you need sellers and buyers both on the platform, both on the network. But do you think a big sort of educational kind of marketing push is required across the country?
No, obviously that's required, but I think, maybe Koshi will talk about it later. They've actually done an amazing job of spreading the message and getting all kinds of actors onto it, seller apps, buyer apps, delivery apps. So I think it's a good thing. But, as I said, things sometimes take time. If you look at the FASTag is a good example. The FASTag was the tag on which you pay the toll thing we conceived it in 2010. And that's 13 years back. It took many years for it to roll out. And today we are finding that apart from the fact that it's used in 1,365 toll booths, it's also used for parking charges. They're going to be now hundreds of places, and startups are now using it for parking or many other use cases. So sometimes these things take long, but I think in this case, it's far more systematic. The awareness is very high. ONDC has done a great job in spreading the message. Antler has done a great job in putting a package together for founders. So I think it's going to be much faster.
What is your broader, bigger, just one more, sir, and then I had a discussion with them right before you came on, so, Mr. Nilekani, what's the bigger vision? I mean, when you were making the presentation, I was, the use case for power, I mean, was something which you highlighted. I never thought of it like that. What is the broader vision for this, for Beacon and ONDC?
No, I think if you look at ONDC and the Beacon protocol, fundamentally, how do you, there was a famous economist called Roland Coase who came up with the Coase's law as to why do firms exist. And firms exist because you can't have everything as a transaction between two people, and therefore you create firms to reduce interaction cost or switching cost of transactions and so on. And therefore, you ended up in the 20th century with large firms which consolidated, whether it was big farms that had all the land or big organized retail and so on. But in today's world where digital capability is democratic, right? Everybody has a phone in their pocket and you have networks, you can actually create large firms, not necessarily by creating one physical firm, but by virtually unifying many small firms, which is what, when we say micro to mega, that's what we mean. And I think India is naturally suited for that because even when you have organized retail and e-commerce, you're still going to have 80% of the things sold through small retailers. You're still going to have 100, all the trucks will be owned, everyone will own 2-3 trucks, and so on. Or, when you come to distributed energy, you'll have thousands of vehicles on the road, all of which have an energy source and an energy consumption device on the car, right? So what you now need is the ability to use protocols, a common language for all of them to talk to each other. So you can take all these disparate micro actors, but bring them together into a virtual whole. And that's what this does. So I think it's suited for our situation, because India doesn't have land to build a huge mall on the outskirts where people drive. That's not going to happen here, right? So there'll always be the small guy. He'll have a small shop. You can order from there. He'll have it delivered to your house. It's happening today. People are ordering on WhatsApp and getting it delivered. But if you can create a better protocol for streamlining this, you'll have huge amounts of value.
Thank you, sir. Nitin and Rajiv, I mean, when did the light bulb go off for you guys that, well, ONDC was the thing and, what you wanted to bet on? If Nitin.
Well, so we have a colleague, Sushmit, who I want to credit for some of the work we started doing here. I think we started to think about this late last year, actually. So it's been about 10 months, or maybe almost a year. And initially, as I mentioned earlier, it was more of, intellectually, this is very interesting. And, we as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, one way to look at it is, take venture risk on new ideas. A lot of them may fail. That's okay. That's our job. This one is particularly interesting for all the reasons that were discussed, because as a protocol, Beacon is designed for dynamic location discovery and matching of resources that are dynamic. So it's not just, ONDC, of course, is the biggest, most visible part of it. But we think that as a protocol itself, the applications could be in so many other areas. So that gave us a sense that this could be broader than just commerce. But within commerce, one of the nice things here is, and of course the value chain of how a dollar or rupee, whatever you want to take, flows from a buyer to a seller, it's not fully clear today. But the beauty of it is, this is commerce. This is transaction. This is dhanda. So a lot of the criticisms that you sometimes see in other models outside of commerce, people are, how will you monetize? How will you scale? I think those concerns will not exist here. If we create a user experience that is working for both sides, there is tremendous value to be shared. And then it also occurred to us, which is important to clarify, this is not about being anti-Amazon or Flipkart. I think that was very important to realize. This is not something we think is will kill the large incumbents. I think it's a new construct which could also create opportunities for both large companies and small companies. So the unbundling is what we felt quite excited by. And then the next thing was, which is what we discussed, can we do our part to build talent density and get this started, be a small spark, and then can we do it in a structured way, which is what the package that Rajiv went through.
Rajiv, you want to add to that?
The only thing I want to add is, Prashant, don't be guilty of asking Nandan all the questions. We are also it's in our selfish interest to just understand as to how he thinks. So for every one question you ask us, do ask him 4 questions.
Mr. Nilekani, I have the license now to
So he has the license. We also spent time with him before this session. But I think for us, the way the whole, infrastructure sitting, underneath, the protocol layer sitting on top, and then the application layer coming, sometimes some of these don't take off, right? And as we said, even during the last conversation, for us, we had fascination, Mr. Nandan, for Web3 also. But of course, some of the people who got into that ecosystem were not the, most ethical people globally, right? And because of which you see the ripple effect of something negative happening when the wrong founders, quote unquote, get into what actually has a really strong benefit of being decentralized. So we want to do our bit to be able to get the right set of people to be working on something here. And the revolution always starts with someone who's a luminary who's sort of raising up their hand and building the core underlying infrastructure as well as the protocol layer, because that's not where usually venture risk happens, because there's a public-private partnership that's required. but it's really the business application layer and the talent layer, which is where someone like us can add any kind of even a small value. And that's really what we are trying to do, right? And we do hope that it takes off, because I think, as Magnus mentioned, making progress inevitable is, at the end of the day, the reason why Nitin and me are doing this. And if we can do that across the ecosystem, I think that'll be a phenomenal impact.
I just want to add one thing which keeps coming up in our internal conversations, right? And maybe this is also for the founders. Somebody asked us, if you ask us what our assessment of the Indian ecosystem right now is, we will say that founder quality and pedigree is impressive. The quality of ideas is still incremental in most cases. And this is not a criticism, it's just a reflection of, we have, compared to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, much more experienced, competent founders who've gone through cycles. But there are few disruptive, bold, massive new ideas. And that's what changes the world. And we certainly feel this is, in India at least, the most impressive idea. Of course, we can think about AI in a more general sense, and that is also very interesting. But this is the biggest. And in fact, another interesting angle is, as generative AI develops, can there be some interesting changes to how a seller goes online in the entire workflow? And what could happen if that comes together with ONDC?
Mr. Nilekani, is it, Nitin said, it's not against platforms, it's not against an Amazon or a Flipkart, but, the common person, when they hear about ONDC and the way it's explained, etc., still says, well, so obviously Amazon and Flipkart aren't going to be happy, or the other platforms, Swiggy or Zomato, whoever it may be. How do you explain that as an idea?
No, I think it's about expanding the market. It's about, if you don't do these things, you'll have only 5-6% of the people in e-commerce. But if you want the whole country to be on e-commerce, you want everyone to be ordering something in his own language with a voice instruction from a local Kirana store. If you want to reduce costs, because this will also help in reducing intermediation cost, because transactions will just flow through the system, then you need to do this. So it's all about expanding, because if you want to create a digital economy, you have to create a digital economy for everybody. It's not about some few guys buying smartphones and all that. It's about everybody participating. So that's what this does. So I think it's going to expand the market for everyone. So everyone will benefit, but more and more people will come into the digital e-commerce world. Many transactions that are happening informally through bilateral sort of transactions will now flow through this. And then a very important thing is that a byproduct of that will be the digital capital it will create, right? So if I'm a small vendor, and I'm on ONDC and I sell, then I have the details of what I've sold electronically, because ONDC the data is there, how much money I've received. Then I can take that data and monetize it to get a loan. So all this formalization of e-commerce, of commerce in the country, enabled with digital, is going to happen. So I think it's not about A versus B. It's really about dramatically expanding the market.